we went to rookie minicamp, left rookie minicamp. I think there were plenty of takeaways. You look at this team in the 48 hours that you spent there. What were your biggest ones from a rookie class that seemingly they only brought one extra guy from, but we also got to see guys like Roman Wilson and Troy Fautanu and everybody else?
Yeah, I think my first takeaway, and I kind of start at the top of the draft class, the biggest one was I think Troy Fautanu playing right tackle almost exclusively. I think that's a pretty big indicator to me that they see him as a starter right away.
Yeah.
I then it like Dan Moore, it's possible, I guess, that they throw him out there at right tackle and they say, hey, if you can figure it out, you can figure it out, and you can be our starter. But I think we've talked about it this offseason. I don't really see Dan Moore as a right tackle. I don't think that is really going to be an option for him. I don't think that's where he plays his best football. So I think the fact that they are putting Fautanu there tells me they want Broderick Jones surely at left tackle, obviously, but they want it sooner rather than later. And they're going to be pretty comfortable throwing Fautanu out there to be a starter week one. I think they're just looking at it from a talent perspective. They're going to live with some growing pains maybe for a guy who's flipping over to a different side from where he played most of his last college season. And they're just looking at the talent saying, we can't afford to keep this guy off the field. We need him in a spot to start immediately.
Yeah, I thought Fautanu playing the right side actually, it encouraged me, just like you said, because I like to see that they have options. I like to see that the Steelers are looking at this and saying, we want to make sure that we're not just going to assume that Fautanu is the left tackle and Broderick Jones is the right tackle. We're going to look at this and say, we'll see who's the best at both positions, and then we'll fill that out. And I think that's the way to go about it, is make sure that you have the best five out there and the best five positions that they play. And maybe that's Fautanu playing the right side. Maybe it's him playing the left side, but at least they're going to prepare for him to do both, which I think is big. Like I don't look at the Steelers as a team who should be locked into a certain starting lineup. I think that they should be open when it comes to their right and left tackle. And I think Fautanu playing the right side definitely encouraged me. I have two of them. My first one is I thought Jonathan Ward was a lock to make this 90-man roster. Like I thought he was a lock to come in here and get signed to a one-year deal. And maybe that still happens. I mean, it's only Monday. Rookie camp ended yesterday. So maybe they ink him to a deal this afternoon, but I find it hard to believe that the Steelers are going to continue to look through this class for longer than 24 hours or so. I think at some point they're just going to close the door and say, okay, that's it. That's our guys. That's our 90-man team. Here we go. I thought he was a lock. He looked really good during, I guess, walkthroughs, individual drills during those times. Eddie Faulkner continued to compliment him. I mean, he talked about his old man hands and how that's a good thing and how much power he has. And, I said to you a couple of times, I thought he was Edwards out of Georgia. And I was like, man, dude, this kid looks really good. And then I realized it wasn't him. And I was like, oh man, Jonathan Ward actually looks really good. Thought he was a lock to make the 90-man roster. I thought he was a guy that could compete to make the team at 26 years old. And then my other one was Roman Wilson. I thought Roman Wilson looks really good. I think that there was never a moment where you heard a wide receiver coach kind of telling him, hey, you got to do this different or you're doing this wrong. It was all just like, hey, great job, Roman. Great job. Way to do that correctly, Roman. I thought he looked really, really good. I thought he looked the part of a guy who's coming in here and ready to showcase how much of an impact he could actually make.
Yeah, I think to go back to your first point, I mean, the thing about Ward, like, do they have enough running backs, to go into training camp? Like, because I believe they only have 4 under contract right now, going into going into OTAs. I believe it's just, or maybe only 3, right? Because it's Warren, Harrison, and Edwards now that they just signed him. Like, do you think they're still going to add to the running backs room? Like, why not? If they're still going to add, why not add Ward?
So I agree with you. They also have Aaron Shapkin, which
how could I forget that?
Yeah, I don't know who that is, to be honest with you. So they technically have 5, I guess, but still, like last year, the way I looked at it, and I still think that they're going to add because, I mean, last year Najee Harris took about 7 snaps during training camp, and I don't expect him to take more this year. I expect Jaylen Warren to also be on a snap count during training camp because, I mean, they're not going to continue to just run him into the ground, especially if their long-term plan is to see if he's a starting running back. So I think both of those guys are going to be very limited during training camp. I have a hard time believing that they could just go through it with the 3 guys that they have behind them. maybe they really feel good about Edwards, but I don't know. I thought for certain that they'd add Jonathan Ward just to make sure that they had enough depth.
Yeah. And well, because I'm going to say last year, I mean, I guess there were times where we were meeting a new running back at training camp every week. Like
Yeah.
there were guys were rotating in and out. So maybe they still do that, but I feel like they had something good in Jonathan Ward right there. It was a little confusing as to why they didn't just take what they had right in front of them
Yeah.
to add to that depth. Because I feel like they're still going to have to pick some guys up before training camp actually starts.
Yeah. Oh, they definitely are. Like, there's no way that they could go into training camp with that. And I don't know how many guys are on their 90-man team right now, but again, I have a very hard time believing that Najee is going to take more of a workload than he took last year at training camp, and Jalen is going to take the same workload. I expect him to take much less. And Cordero Patterson is 32 years old. Like, you're not going to look at him and say, all right, dude, you're the guy. You're taking, 40, 50 reps a day. That's just not going to happen. So I think you're going to need younger guys. To a degree, you're going to want to get these guys to mesh with the new offensive line and a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback and all that stuff. But I still think you could do that without any live physical reps. And I think they need bodies, and they need good ones. And I thought Jonathan Ward, I mean, he's got experience playing in the NFL. He plays special teams. He could return kicks and punts. I thought he was an option. I'm surprised that he didn't make it. But again, maybe if he doesn't get signed somewhere else, he comes here in a month. You just never know. Maybe by the end of the day he's inked. Who knows? But I was shocked. I thought he would have been right there with Everett, who got signed immediately.
Yeah, I would have too. And to your other point, I mean, I completely agree about Roman Wilson. I mean, that guy looks. I don't want to say ready to go, but
Yeah.
he looks smooth, like technically sound. I'm eager to see him, catch some passes. Eager to see how that kind of relationship with the other quarterbacks has grown or will continue to grow, or how he looks, actually repping with them. But I think from like a route running perspective, from a speed perspective, that guy I think has all the tools that he's going to need to be successful in this offense. And again, it all comes with a grain of salt that you got to see guys in pads. But I'm not any less excited about Roman Wilson. I'm not any less confident that he's they're probably their wide receiver too at this point in the season right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm more confident right now. I was a little worried about what I was going to see, and don't get me wrong, like there wasn't a moment where I was like, oh my gosh, Roman Wilson is a ridiculous talent. There just wasn't that there, but it was good to see that there were no hiccups. It wasn't a starting line further back than I expected it to be. So that's a very positive sign if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think right now, if they're freaking out, which I think they still want a wide receiver, but if they end up with Roman Wilson as their two feeling good about it, I think that they're in a spot where it doesn't really, really hurt them.